some joy out of it. We can't keep going without any joy. So to help us to do that, I'd like to ask a little question. What do you think this is? I'll just give you a clue as to what it's not. One brother said that looks like a piece of Egyptian pottery covered in hieroglyphics. What on earth was he talking about? Do you see that? That is a piece of wood. But not just a piece of wood. That is a piece of seasoned timber. Now close the eyes and reflect on the most beautiful piece of furniture you've ever seen. Chippendale, Sheraton, Hepplewhite, Charles Rennie Mackintosh. And no doubt that piece of furniture is also made from seasoned timber. But how could you get from this to that piece of timber, that piece of furniture rather? It's a craftsman's approach. We discussed this last time around, if you recall. Do you remember this? Yes. And the Society are emphasising it over and over again, because we have to get this clearly set out in our mind. Because we have actually convinced ourselves at times that there are no interested ones left in that world. There are. There are people who are like seasoned timber out there, and we have to apply the techniques of a craftsman to step by step take that seasoned timber to become a witness of Jehovah. It's a long-term project at times, because people's lives are all upside down. But there are still ones out there like seasoned timber. And of course, even if ones at the moment aren't like seasoned timber, well, we know the seasoning process is taking place. Do you recall how that happens? We knock on their door, they're quite dismissive. We go back in 2 weeks' time, they love us. Why? It's because something's happened in that person's life and it's completely changed them. Perhaps the death of a loved one. Or perhaps they've been watching their television again. Remember what happens? They look at it and they think to themselves, well, 25 years ago, Jehovah's Witnesses came along and said that this would happen just prior to God stepping in. And here it is. I better speak to them when they come along next. The seasoning process is taking place. But what we're going to do today is just reflect on how we here can reach our full potentials as craftsmen, handling the word of truth aright. Of course, if you wanted to be a cabinet maker, you could have no better training than to go back in history and stand at the shoulder of Thomas Chippendale or Mr. Sheraton or Hepplewhite. But we can't do that with regards to cabinets. But we can go back in history and stand at the shoulder of the greatest craftsman the world has ever seen. And that's what we're going to do right now. Let's open our Bibles to Luke chapter 10 and just reflect on what this craftsman helps us to see we have to undertake in order to develop this craftsman's approach to the ministry. So that's Luke chapter 10. And look at verses 25 through 28. We'll just read the experience and then we'll review it once more to see what Jesus Christ actually teaches us. So there in verse 25, it says, "Now look, a certain man versed in the law rose up to test him out and said, 'Teacher, by doing what shall I inherit everlasting life?' He," that is Jesus, "said to him, 'What is written in the law? How do you read?' In answer, the man said, 'Well, you must love Jehovah your God with your whole heart, with your whole soul, with your whole strength, and with your whole mind. Oh, and your neighbour as yourself.' He," Jesus said to him, "You answered correctly. Keep on doing this and you'll get life." Now, what's so marvellous about that example of teaching? How does Jesus Christ teach us to be a craftsman there? Well, did you see in verse 25 what this man did? He rose up to test Jesus out. Can you imagine the audacity of that man? He was testing out the greatest teacher the world has ever seen. And what did Jesus Christ do? Did he use his superior intellect or knowledge of the law or natural abilities to squash that man in front of all of his friends and humiliate him? He could have done that. But what he did is very interesting. Because although the man rose up to test Jesus out, Jesus' reply started to work on that man's heart. Notice what he says in verse 26. Instead of humiliating him, he said, well, what is written in the law? How do you read? In other words, he was saying to the man, forget everybody else. I know they've been putting you up to this. Ignore them. You know the law. What do you say the answer is? And the man was on the back foot, and he would have stumbled through his reply. Well, you've got to love Jehovah with your whole heart, soul, strength, mind, and your neighbour as yourself. And then Jesus Christ, who the man acknowledged was a teacher, in front of all those people, he looked the man right in the eye and said, well done. I knew you knew the answer. When you stood up, I thought, here's a man who knows the law. He's well versed in the law. Well done. And then Jesus took it to a different plane completely. Because did you see at the end of verse 28, when he said, keep doing this and you will get life. Now Jesus was doing something very clever there, because he was paraphrasing Leviticus 18 verse 5. In other words, he was saying, forget everyone else. You and I, we both know what the Bible says, what the law says. Do you remember? I'll just paraphrase it just for you, because I know you can understand. Keep doing it and you'll get life. There's the answer. But the man still had one further question. In verse 29, who really is my neighbour? And what did Jesus do? He gave that stunning illustration that went right to the point. Remember the Good Samaritan? Well, that illustration really helped to prove who the neighbour was. So at the end of verse 36, where Jesus Christ said to the man, who of these three seems to you to have made himself neighbour to the man that fell among the robbers? The man was starting to work. Jesus Christ had drawn up the thoughts and intentions of his heart. Who seems to you to be the good neighbour? And the man, he just couldn't quite bring himself to turn around and say in front of all those Jews, well, the Samaritan, and he's better than the Levite and the priest. He couldn't quite bring himself to do it, but he got the point, hadn't he? Because in verse 37, the man said, it was the one that acted mercifully toward him. And Jesus then said to him, well, you go on your way and be doing the same yourself. Now, if you read through those words, it just takes 3 or 4 minutes. But in verse 25, the man stood up to test Jesus out. He was arrogant, he was dismissive. But because of this master craftsman at work, in just saying a few sentences, that man was taken 180 degrees. And when he walked away, he was thinking to himself, forget everyone else. What am I going to do? This Jesus Christ is right. Do you think we can teach like that? In just a few minutes, take those who are arrogantly dismissive and help them to become servants of Jehovah. We don't know what this man actually did. We don't know if he was seasoned timber, but if he was, he would have been a follower of Christ, wouldn't he? Because the master craftsman had been hard at work with that man. How did Jesus Christ do it? Well, did you see in verse 26, he didn't give the man the answer. He made the man think. The man already knew the answer. It was written down in the law. So Jesus said, well, what does the law say? He focused the attention on the scriptures. And then in verse 28, imagine how that man felt when Jesus Christ said, well done to him and commended him. Do you think he would have started to soften? But he still had those points that he wanted to raise. Well, who was my neighbour? And Jesus Christ, well, Jesus had the ability to, on the spur of the moment, bring out of the hat, as it were, a stunning illustration. But that illustration really hit that man's heart, did it not? And then Jesus Christ finished up with the, well, it's decision time. What are you going to do? And the man would have followed through on that if he was seasoned timber. Now we all here can do exactly the same. Every single one of us has the ability to teach just like Jesus Christ. What we lack sometimes is confidence and the realization that Jehovah's given us the tools to do the job, and he's taught us the techniques to do it also. Let's just reason. Think this out. What do you think the tools are? What do you think the big B is? The most important tool we'll ever have, really, when you think about it. Brother Duncan.
God's Word, our Bible.
It must be. Do you remember why God's Word, the Bible, is the most powerful tool we'll ever have? It's because when you open it and you read from it, you're not just quoting a man. The Bible says it's inspired by God. God breathed. So it's almost like Jehovah God leaning forward and from heaven speaking right via that man's ear, through his mind, and into his heart. That's what the Bible does. Are we still using the Bible in our ministry? We spoke about this last time. If we're still using it, isn't it true the Bible does so much work for us? We get into the habit of thinking, well, all I'm going to do is use the magazines, because the magazines have got a full stop at the end of them. And it ends up with the simple answer, yes or no, from the householder. But really, if we want to be craftsmen, we have to learn how to use this book. And we use it continually in our meetings because it helps us. What would you think of someone who came to your house to do some work and said, I'm a craftsman. Take a look at my tools in my bag. They're marvellous, aren't they? You look in and think, oh, dear me, you've got the best tools available. But he never got them out. He never used them. He could have claimed to be a craftsman, but he could have used the tools to be a craftsman in a craftsman-like manner. We have to get used to using the Bible. But one reason that we don't, again, is that lack of confidence. It's true, isn't it? We think sometimes, no, I can't remember, my memory's not so good. I don't know how you feel, but my memory's appalling. I was in the ministry recently. It was a cold day, mind. I didn't have a hat on. And a man raised a question. And I was looking for the resurrection proof. But you can look for eternity in 1 Corinthians 10. You'll never see it. You'll never see it. And I was there trying to waffle my way until I found it. And I couldn't find it. And when I came off the door, it's in 15. Chapter. Do you ever think that sometimes knowing that we're going to fumble puts us off ever using the Bible? Could be, couldn't it? Or what we're going to do about it. What we need is to have someone with us who will look after us. That's true, isn't it? Just imagine if you had a member of the governing body standing by the side of you in the ministry, or the writing committee, and every time you got to a sticky point, you just said, well, he'll take over now. Would that give you more confidence? Yeah, well, we have. RB times 2. What do you think RB times 2 stands for? For the gold, Alan. RB times 2.
The reasoning book and the require brochure.
That's it. And which one of those is a member of the governing body standing by our side, ready to step in to give us whatever assistance we need? It's the reasoning book. Be honest, when was the last time we used the reasoning book in the ministry? We've all got it in our bag. It's true, it's in every Jehovah's Witness. You look in their bag, they've always got a Bible, they've always got a reasoning book. But you know, this tool is so powerful. It gives us so much confidence because there is not a question that can be raised by anyone that cannot be answered in about 2 minutes using this book. And this week, this is the focus of our attention. So when we come along for our meetings for field service, please remember to bring this book. In fact, I assume that there's plenty there in stock. So if you haven't got one, or you'd like a new one, get one tonight. Because this book makes the ministry so simple and yet so effective. And that's what we'll be doing. So there's another tool. Of course, the require brochure. Well, one of our problems in our country is that we don't start Bible studies. But we don't start them because we're not offering them. That's a real problem. Well, the require brochure starts studies so simply. Kingdom Ministry insert January 1999. Starting studies in the require brochure. Have you ever wondered why some people have 15 studies on their report? I know brothers and sisters who've got 15 plus studies on their report. I look through all the reports, you see. What? Do you think they're supernatural, these people? Yeah, they're not, because there's not a halo in appearance on them. Nothing. No. They're just brothers just like us. All they do is they put into practice what the society tell us. 15 studies. Would you like a study? Me too. Use the required brochure skillfully, it comes about. And of course we've got KB amongst our tools. Now what's the KB stand for? Sister Goff.
The knowledge book.
The knowledge book. You know, if you want to help someone to become a witness of Jehovah, sooner or later they've got to study the knowledge book, because the knowledge book helps us to find in the Bible all the answers to the main questions that people pose. But don't fall into the trap. Don't fall into the trap of thinking the knowledge book is a revamped Live Forever book, or it's the truth book with a different colour cover. It's nothing to do with the truth book or the Live Forever book. In fact, unless we use the knowledge book in the way that we've been taught to use it, it doesn't work. You know, we have got ones in our circuit who recently got baptised after 4 months of studying the knowledge book. And the only reason that's the case is because brothers are using the knowledge book in the format the way society suggests. If we don't, they're not going to get baptised. Because they'll think, and let's face it, we all know of ones who've got it into their mind that as long as they have us in, they're safe. We can't say that. They have to come to know Jehovah God as a real person and draw close to him. The knowledge book will enable them to do it if we use it properly. So there are the tools, but how about techniques? Now what's a PRV? Ooh, PRV. What could a PRV be? Irene, please. Hey, no one gets this right first time.
Progressive return visit.
Until now. It's really stole my thunder, that is. A progressive return visit. How do you get a progressive return visit? How do you get progressive return visits? What do you think? Is this how you do it? What is you pray a lot, and you go in the bottom of your bag and you get all the S8s. Now some brothers, we don't use S8s anymore, but you still see them, don't you? Because we're calling back on people that we spoke to about 7 months ago. And they're crumpled up in the bottom of the bag, and we get them out and think, oh yes, that's right, I remember her. 7 months ago I spoke to this lovely lady, I'll just pop back. And you knock on the door, she hasn't got a clue who you are. And you're not even sure if she's the right person. And you go, how are you? Isn't it lovely? Lovely weather. Do you remember me? No. And we're not even sure we remember her. Is that a progressive return visit? No. No, that's almost like first call again, but done badly. We get progressive return visits when we prepare them. Preparation is the key. Strange, we get our sisters get on the platform and give our lovely talks. How much preparation do you think a sister puts into a 5-minute talk? Hours. And they're stunning, aren't they, the talks? You can prove the most difficult point in just 5 minutes. They've got their 2 scriptures worked out. Perhaps they've got a little comment from a little publication, perhaps a reasoning book or something. And in 5 minutes, they get off the platform and the point is proven. Do you think if we did that with every return visit, they'd be progressive? We have to get into our mind the idea that we go along, we answer a question, we raise the next one, and then we leave. Have you ever spoken to brothers and they said, oh, I had a tremendous call there. I was there for an hour. And then someone else pushes through and says, well, my call was better. I was at my call for 2 hours. And then someone pulls through and says, oh, that's nothing. 2.5 hours. That must have been a marvellous call. And you go back, and you can never get them in. Look at the curtains. It's because the people are lying down on the floor underneath the front window, and their breath is moving the curtains, because they just haven't got 2 hours. They like us, they like the message, and they've got questions, but they haven't got 2 hours, so they hide. If we can get in quick, answer the question, and then leave, raising the next one, they won't feel like that. Do you remember what the success or the key to a successful return visit is? Do you remember that? Doctor Who. Doctor Who is the key to a successful return visit. Brother McManus remembers. He's going to explain to us why.
Always leave the cliffhanger. and then you have to go back the next week to find out what's happened.
That's it. So if we can get into the habit of leaving people on the edge of their doorstep, saying, well, yes, but what about this? What about this? Well, I'll have to pop back tomorrow. I've taken all my time up now. I'll pop back tomorrow, just spend 5 minutes, and I'll answer that question. That's all I'll do. When we walk down the garden path, they'll be there waiting for us. They know exactly who we are. They still remember the question. They've been inside speaking to their friends about it. And they're waiting for the answer. And if we can get them used to seeing that the answers are available, they'll keep asking questions. And if they know that we're going to give them an answer in just 5 minutes, they'll like the answers. Because it's also reasonable. Do you feel confident enough to use the reasoning book in our return visit ministry? Because all I do is I just open it up and read it. So simple, some say that'll never work. It works every time. I've never had anybody dismiss it. Use the reasoning book in the return visit ministry and you see people transform themselves from no, into, well, that's right then. It takes about 2 minutes usually. All we've got to do is use the tools. And of course, if we keep going back and using the tools and we have progressive return visits, after 4 of those, what have we got? We've got the dreaded Bible study. Now that takes a lot of commitment, doesn't it? Sometimes, if we're honest, we shy away from Bible studies because we just haven't got the time ourselves. I'll just stick with the magazine placements because, well, I can always pop back with another 2. But the joy that comes to those who develop a Bible study ministry, looking at people and think, now this person could well be a Christian in 5 years' time, 2 years' time, a year's time, 6 months, 4 months. Now that's when the ministry changes. And all of a sudden we realise that we don't go out into the ministry to beat ourselves so that we can earn the new world. Because we're kidding ourselves if that's the case. Jehovah God wants us to do our best, and he wants to bless us because of that. So really, if you want to sum up all the different things on the board there of what we're aiming for this week, take a good look at Acts chapter 17, when we can do so. Acts chapter 17. And what is it that Paul teaches us here about teaching? So we'll just run through this. What is he actually pointing out for our benefit? Acts chapter 17. And look at what it says there from verse 2. So according to Paul's custom, he went inside to them, and for 3 Sabbaths he reasoned with them from the Scriptures, explaining and proving by references that it was necessary for the Christ to suffer and to rise from the dead, and saying, this is the Christ, this Jesus, whom I am publishing to you. What does he teach us? How many Sabbaths did he go in to reason with them? 3. 3 return visits. And that was the Apostle Paul. He was a craftsman. He did 3 return visits on those ones. And also it says he reasoned with them from the Scriptures. Do you think he would have used the reasoning book if he'd had it? Oh yes. His ministry was very simple and direct. If he'd had the reasoning book, he would have been reading it out. And also it says he reasoned with them from the Scriptures, explaining and proving by references. Well, the reasoning book gives us the ability to do that. Everything you need on a particular topic is listed out in the correct order in that chapter. And all I do is, we'll see this week, is I just get it out, open it up, and start reading. And people respond. If you pause in the right place and just say, what do you think about that? They say, that's true, that. That's true. So you agree with the Bible then? Oh yeah, I agree with that. I didn't know that was in the Bible. You do now. And that's what Paul did. But there's just one thing that he missed out on, or we've missed out on. If we want to be a teacher, a craftsman like Jesus Christ, or like the Apostle Paul, we have to keep in mind that it doesn't come automatically. Did you see in verse 2? So according to Paul's, it was his custom. First time Paul went out, do you think he was successful in the ministry? Probably not. Probably fumbled his way and wasn't quite sure. But he kept going. And the further he went, the more he used the tools that he had, The more he applied the techniques that he had been taught, remember, the better a craftsman he became. And that's the same with us. Forget the past. If we've only been using magazines in our ministry up till now, let's get out of our mind that that is all that's required. We can do better if we reach out this week to reach our full potentials as craftsmen, handling word of truth aright. Come along to our meetings for field service and we'll be showing how simple and easy that really is. Well, there's a challenge. But remember, Jehovah's hand is never short. He never asks us to do something that we can't do. And we get so much joy back from knowing that he's happy because we've done our best. So let's try that out this week. We'll be using the reasoning book, continuing to use the Bible, and we'll be pleasantly surprised as to what's going to happen. Okay, so